The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission is suing 5 people for their alleged involvement in a Ponzi scheme at Bitconnect, a crypto lending and exchange platform that collapsed in 2018. According to the SEC's complaint, Bitconnect used a network of promoters to offer and sell over $2 billion in securities without registering the offering with the SEC and without being registered as broker-dealers as required by federal securities laws. Joining us now to discuss is defense attorney and former SEC Enforcement Branch Chief Lisa Braganca. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you.
So, Lisa, this news broke just before the weekend, and I'd love to get your initial thoughts. And what did Bitconnect do that was more egregious than other ICOs, initial coin offerings out there at the time?
Well, Bitconnect did, I think, pretty typically what a lot of the others were doing at the time. This was 2017, was right after the Dow report came out. The SEC had just kind of put the word out, hey, watch out, these coins fit the definition of a security under the Howey test. So I think the timing was really important. What was interesting here was that there's so many interesting things about this particular case, but the whole thing came down. Bitconnect just kind of ended because of state regulators. Texas and North Carolina brought cease and desist actions, and it didn't even take the federal government doing anything. That was Bitconnect just took everything down. So then we've had this period of time, a class action was brought fairly soon, and that alleged fraud. And what another interesting thing that I find in this SEC complaint is that there is no allegation of fraud. This is purely you failed to register your coin as a security with us. You failed to register your the salespeople as broker dealers, and then there's some aiding and abetting. You aided and abetted.
Is it fair to call it a Ponzi scheme then?
It is. I would say this is one that I wouldn't necessarily call a Ponzi scheme. There's a lot of overlap between a Ponzi scheme and a pyramid scheme, but this really was built like a pyramid scheme. This is a type of case that you see much more often from the Federal Trade Commission, where you've got, the words in it. As I was reading it, I just was, it was hearkening back to FTC cases where, you've got all these downlines and you have, the pyramids in terms of compensation for bringing people in. And, if I bring somebody in who then brings somebody in who then brings somebody in, I get a piece of those, of the profits that are coming in from all those people in my downlines. Typically we don't see downlines that often in SEC cases. But again, this is all of these sort of, I read the complaint and I read something that, sings fraud, and yet there's no fraud allegations here. So I found that interesting, that I think we have a new administration, we have a new chairman, and it's hard to know with a case like this because surely they've been working on this for a long time before the new chairman showed up. And it's very hard to know the particular facts here. I mean, clearly they cannot go after the main bad guy. He is in India, and he was arrested in Gujarat. So, things are happening. There are criminal investigations going on, and, arrests being made in Australia and India, and who knows where else.
So there's a sense that this is a globally coordinated investigation and legal investigation.
I think so. I would imagine that, there is more coordination going on in this one than there has been in the past. And I think it's also interesting, just to get the word out, the FBI is still not recruiting, but certainly reaching out to find people who lost money in this case. So, the frustrating thing is I get lots of calls from people who have lost money in these types of things, and there's not really much that the FBI or that the SEC or, folks can do for them. But it is a help in the future. You might, if you did lose money, you might want to contact the FBI so that you can help them to keep this from happening in the future.
Is the issue that they didn't, is at least one of the issues that they didn't put some sort of hurdle to keep U.S. citizens from paying into the scheme? What are the technicalities involved here with that? I mean, can any if they put up something saying U.S. citizens can't do it and U.S. citizens found an easy way around that, would they still find themselves in this kind of hot water that they do now?
That's a great question, Lawrence, and people are wrestling with that so much because you can set up a virtual private network, and how would the coin offerer know? You're completely hidden. You can lie. But given the timing for this case, I don't think that really comes up because this happened in 2017 when it was kind of a free-for-all in the U.S. But the other thing is these folks who are charged live in the U.S. So the SEC isn't trying. The SEC could bring a case based on just, let's say, I, Lisa, decide to offer a coin and I'm not going to register it and I'm going to just out and out make it a fraud. Hopefully this will not be cited, in some criminal case against me. This is a hypothetical. But I decide I will sell it 100% to people outside of the country and not in the U.S. at all. I still would be potentially violating U.S. law. And
Lisa, sorry to interrupt you. So you mentioned, obviously this has been in the works for a while. This isn't a new case, but I think everybody's really, trying to read what this means and what this means going forward. And now we have like a new SEC chair in, and I'm just curious, what is your sense of what this new era is going to look like? Are we going to see more enforcement, stricter enforcement, clearer enforcement? Just if you had to sort of give a sense of where the SEC is going to be going in this new term.
I think we're going to see clearer enforcement. I mean, we are already seeing the change in the administration. I won't get into a whole lot of it, but I've been very involved in, expungement rulings and this whole esoteric area where people get complaints removed from their broker-dealer public record. And there's been a big change at the SEC in how they are responding to that type of information. So there's definitely a new sheriff in town. Everybody who comes in at that kind of top level makes a decision about, how much they want to upset the apple cart. And I remember when Harvey Pitt came in, we all were thrown on our butts. He had a very, very, very different style than previous chairman. You got to adjust. You got to get ready for it. But I don't think that Gensler is anywhere near like a Harvey Pitt, but he's hard charging. He's smart, and he's willing to halt things and say, wait a minute, I need to understand this. I need to know that this is the right thing to do. He's not just going to let things go on just because, it's the continuation of, something that has been in the works for 2 years.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that how in the Bitconnect case, like you had the important role of these individual states, right? And that's one of the really interesting things about America is that you have like these individual states, a sort of patchwork of different regulations. And Gary Gensler has implied that he wants more of like a federal framework, kind of something a little bit more consolidated. Do you think that's going to happen?
I think it's going to happen, and I think that many of the states will support it. I think states are overwhelmed. I mean, they just don't have the resources. The vast majority of them. There are tiny, tiny few states that have the resources to be able to really regulate. But the vast majority of them do not. And that's just the reality. And it's so much more efficient to do it through a federal, through federal lens. So, I think there will not be much pushback on that. And my hope of hopes is, maybe he will move that into other areas, just like, he was a trailblazer and, took care of swaps regulation. And granted, it's not done. He gets faulted for that. But, swaps was like a global mess, that he was sorting through. So I give him a lot of credit for that. But, boy, if he can get into, also regulating insurance and, just the things that sort of are existing out in the along the periphery, then, he's going to be very interested. I still love that he taught a class on blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And, so you can go online and you can see all the things that, or not all, but a lot of the things that he thinks and says about Bitcoin and blockchain and where this whole process is going.